Deep within the emerald jungles of Papua New Guinea, two world leaders trudged along a treacherous trail once soaked in the blood of war. In April 2024, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his Papua New Guinean counterpart, James Marap, undertook a symbolic hike along the historic Kokoda Trail, a World War II battleground where Australian forces fought to defend the Pacific from Japanese expansion. But this wasn't just a commemorative walk. It was a modern-day mission, one part military homage, two parts strategic maneuver. As they called each other brother and paused for reflection on shared sacrifices, their message was clear. Australia intends to remain the Pacific's most trusted ally, even as the region becomes a new front in an intensifying geopolitical struggle. The South Pacific is often painted as a vast stretch of empty ocean, a maritime void. But look closely and you'll find a scattering of 14 independent island nations, small in size, but immense in strategic value. Only one, Papua New Guinea, has a population exceeding 1 million. Collectively, their GDP barely matches that of Vermont, but their geographic placement and natural resources have made them central in a silent war for influence, one increasingly dominated by three major players: the United States, Australia, and China. These island nations control massive exclusive economic zones, waters stretching 370 kilometers from their shores, rich with fish stocks and untapped seabed minerals. Beneath their oceans run critical undersea cables that power global internet connectivity. And scattered across the Pacific are deepwater ports and potential military outposts, each one a geopolitical prize. For decades, Australia and the US enjoyed uncontested influence in this region. That era is ending. China's Pacific strategy has moved beyond trade and into full-spectrum engagement: economic, diplomatic, and increasingly, military. Between 2008 and 2022, China committed over $10 billion in development aid to the region, making it the second largest donor after Australia. And while only half of those promises have materialized into actual projects, the message is clear. Beijing isn't just knocking, it's walking in the door. In 2019, Beijing scored a diplomatic coup when both the Solomon Islands and Kiribati severed ties with Taiwan in favor of China. Nauru followed suit in 2024. These shifts weren't merely symbolic. They represented Beijing's growing success in shifting the regional balance. China's military ambitions are even more concerning to the West. In 2022, a leaked draft security agreement revealed China had secured rights to dock its naval vessels in the Solomon Islands. The deal, kept largely under wraps, placed Chinese warships within 2,000 kilometers of the Australian coastline. The implications were staggering. If operationalized, the agreement could allow Beijing to surveil US and Australian activities more frequently, interdict shipping lanes, and project military power deeper into the Pacific.
The Chinese military exercises sparking alarm over waters off Australia's east coast.
In February this year, a Chinese naval task force conducted live-fire exercises off Australia's eastern coast, undetected by Australian defense forces. Canberra only learned of the operation thanks to a Virgin Australia pilot who spotted the ships mid-flight. Australia has responded with an unprecedented diplomatic surge. Since taking office, Prime Minister Albanese and Foreign Minister Penny Wong have visited nearly every Pacific island nation. Wong described the regional contest as permanent, a reflection of the high stakes involved. In 2023, Australia signed a landmark security pact with Tuvalu, a nation of just 11,000 people facing existential threats from climate change. The deal allows for annual migration to Australia in exchange for giving Canberra influence over Tuvalu's future diplomatic and security ties. Albanese also struck deals with Nauru, providing financial aid in exchange for a veto over foreign security partnerships, and with PNG, pledging $384 million to fund a rugby league team in the Australian National Rugby League. Sports diplomacy? Maybe. But it's proving effective. Australia is also in active negotiations for a comprehensive defense treaty with Papua New Guinea and is advancing a multilateral policing initiative across the Pacific, allowing for rapid deployment of officers in times of crisis. But despite Canberra's intensified efforts, a disruptive force looms, not from Beijing, but from Washington. Former President Donald Trump's return to the global stage has rattled Australia's strategy. His prior administration slashed foreign aid, abandoned climate leadership, and retreated from multilateralism, all issues Pacific nations care deeply about. On April 2nd, Trump announced sweeping tariffs on Pacific Island imports. 30% on Nauru, 32% on Fiji, and 22% on Vanuatu. Although later paused for 90 days, the damage was done. On the same day Vanuatu's new tariffs were announced, its national newspaper ran a front-page story about China donating new police motorcycles and uniforms to the island's security forces. The symbolism could not have been clearer. The Pacific's gravest concern, however, remains climate change. For nations like Kiribati, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands, the crisis is existential. Rising seas are swallowing coastlines. Saltwater is contaminating freshwater reserves. Entire communities are facing relocation.
The team ever assembled to go and get it. It's called Drill, Baby, Drill.
And in this context, Trump's mantra of drill, baby, drill is seen not as policy, but as betrayal. Mihai Sora of the Lowy Institute says the anger is real. The aid cuts are expected, he says, but Trump's retreat on climate has caused visible frustration. These nations aren't just looking for money, they're looking for solidarity. Australia has tried to fill the leadership vacuum. The Albanese government passed Australia's first legislated climate targets and invested heavily in renewable energy, marking a clear departure from the coal-friendly policies of previous administrations. But can one middle power truly counterbalance the vacuum left by a distracted superpower? China's aid agency, the China International Development Cooperation Agency, CIDCA, has already stepped in where U.S. aid once stood. From infrastructure in Cambodia to renewable energy in Laos, the pattern is clear, and there's little doubt the Pacific is next in line. The next major test for Australia will be finalizing the defense treaty with PNG and advancing the Pacific Policing Force. If either initiative stalls, it may signal that Beijing's influence and Trump-era disillusionment have started to erode Canberra's gains. Sora summarizes the challenge bluntly. China doesn't need to invent a narrative. It simply points to America's exit. The Pacific is watching, and Australia can't plug every hole. Even as Australia increases aid, boosts military cooperation, and uses sports and migration as soft power tools, it faces a deeper challenge: rebuilding the very idea of a values-based international order. Because in the Pacific, power isn't just about ports and money. It's about trust, credibility, and the promise that when storms come, both literal and political, your so-called friends won't disappear with the tide. The next few years will determine who the Pacific turns to when the waters rise. And right now, the waves are getting higher.